Welcome back. This is Solidarity TV, your destination for independent views, grassroots politics, and much more at American University and the Greater District. I am your host, Mana Alibadi. Today, we're kicking off our first ever roundtable discussion with 4 guests who are here to talk about the Palestine-Israel conflict and their campus involvement with this greater issue. So, I'll let you all introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Steve. I'm a senior in the School of Political Affairs, and I'm a member of Students for Justice in Palestine.
Hi everybody, and thank you again, Mana, for having me today. My name is Damian Fontanes. I'm a senior studying political science and sociology, and I'm a member of Students for Justice in Palestine.
My name is Josh Michaels. I'm a senior in CAS, and I'm here to represent Jewish Voice for Peace.
Hello, my name is Ibrahim. I am a senior at the School of Public Affairs. I'm going to dental school next year, and I hope the viewers will be engaged in a nice discussion.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here. We can start with Steve and Damian. If you guys could kind of summarize Students for Justice in Palestine in a few sentences, just so we get a brief background. Tell us what it's about.
Sure. We are a Palestinian rights organization that opposes all forms of racial discrimination, oppression in the Israel-Palestine region. We have a few specific points of unity. You know, there's many different viewpoints represented within our club, but things that we all agree to support is an end to the occupation of East Jerusalem, of the West Bank, of the Gaza Strip, of the Golan Heights as well, often forgotten. We also oppose all discrimination against Palestinians or any other groups within Israel proper itself. So we support the recognition and the respect for equal rights for Israeli Palestinian citizens of Israel. And finally, we support the recognition and respect of the right of return for Palestinian refugees who were expelled or fled in 1948 as well as in 1967.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm also just going to add on to what Steve said. It's important for us as a solidarity organization that we make sure to address the issues of the 3, groups of Palestinians, right? The reason why we have the 3 points of unity of ending the occupation, equality for Palestinians in Israel, and refugees is because it circumvents all 3 segments of Palestinians, especially, in regards to the right of return. Most Palestinians, people don't always know, are the majority of Palestinians living as refugees. So that's very important to us as far as our organization of Palestinian, of advancing for Palestinian rights. And also to add as far as what we stand for, we're also for dismantling the separation wall. By the separation wall, we're referring to the wall that's part of it's along the Green Line of Israel proper and the West Bank, but not all of us are actually on the Green Line. A lot of the wall actually cuts into the West Bank, which means Israel has annexed land that's actually Palestinian in the West Bank, so which is why we're for dismantling the wall, just in order to guarantee Palestinian land rights and things of that sort.
Okay, thank you. And we have 2 representatives from Jewish Voices for Peace, so if you could just briefly describe what your organization is about.
Well, in a nutshell, we agree with all those things laid out by SJP. We also, though, what makes us different is that our approach, that we believe our position as privileged Americans, and more specifically Jewish Americans, and the Jewish tradition of Tikkun Olam, which means repair of the world, we believe it's our responsibility to speak out and address the war crimes that Israel's committed and try to find a amicable settlement.
To add on top of that, I believe that we're focusing more on attracting the Jewish American voice to speak up from within the Jewish community. That being said, the Jewish American community is not really open to severe criticism of the state of Israel, and it's not open to understanding the source of the conflict. And we're just trying to open up the discussion further to have Jewish Americans have a stronger voice on what is right for Israel, rather than succumbing to the interests of AIPAC and organizations that represent the AIPAC mentality, which is basically a very conservative mentality that doesn't represent the majority of Jews. In fact, statistics show that 70% of Jewish Americans vote liberal, whereas you have an organization such as AIPAC, which influences their decisions on voting day to the advantage of AIPAC. We're trying to show that there is another story to the AIPAC side.
Okay, great, thanks for that. just to get a sense of how long you've both been established, I understand SJP has been around for a while, whereas JVP, you guys are pretty much starting up.
We are 2 hours old.
2
2
hours.
Wow,
Yeah.
fresh off the press, I guess. And SJP, just to focus on Israeli Apartheid Week, I know last year when you did this, there was a lot of controversy around your use of the word apartheid. I remember seeing some articles in the Eagle that I've been looking up. So could you explain a little bit about why the usage of the word apartheid, first of all, why you use it, and then second of all, what the opposition to using it is?
Yeah, I mean, the reason for us, using the analogy of apartheid to describe what's going on in Israel and the Palestinian territories is because when you look at the mechanisms of what's going on, you do see measures and policies that are deliberate segregation. For example, if you go to the West Bank, you actually do see segregated roads, segregated buses, segregated housing, and all different things that differentiate between, Palestinians in the West Bank and occupied territories to Israeli settlers, right? There are tremendous amounts of Palestinian homes that get demolished on a regular basis, only for those Palestinian homes that are demolished to become settlements that only Jews are allowed to live in.
Right.
So it's policies such as that where we make the notion of apartheid going on in Israel and Palestine.
So why are people opposed to it? Why?
Just also on the note, I would just like to say, when people hear apartheid, actually this is a point of opposition that some will bring up. People think South Africa, the South African apartheid system, that's where the term comes from. And people say, well, this is very different from South Africa. There are similarities with the South African apartheid system, the system there specifically. In the West Bank, Palestinians, since the Oslo process, formally divide the West Bank into areas A, B, and C. Area C being about 2/3 of the West Bank under full Israeli control. Area A being under Palestinian Authority administrative.
And sorry, the Oslo Accords were what year?
Sorry, that was signed in 1993 between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat.
Okay.
And this divided the West Bank in these 3 areas. And Area C, I mentioned, Area A is controlled by the PA officially. Area B is a little bit mixed. Areas A and B are essentially Bantustans, the black areas of apartheid South Africa that black South Africans were forced into. The PA is much like the Bantustan leaders there, in that it's a very weak sort of administrative body, very weak level of autonomy, basically propped up as an administrative puppet by the real authorities here. But it's important to remember that apartheid does not just refer to the system in South Africa, it's also an international crime defined by the UN. To the effect of crimes against humanity committed in the context of systematic racial oppression. So, even if the...
But isn't the argument that I've been reading from a backlash of students at IU that the reason they're opposed to using the word apartheid is that it's not, in Israel, it's not a system of racial, I guess, oppression. Like, how would you counter that argument?
Well, it's not true. I mean, I've heard the argument, and people say, well, it's discrimination, sure, but it's against non-citizens, Palestinian citizens versus... Well, the thing is, Palestinians in East Jerusalem, they can jump through a certain amount of hoops to become Israeli citizens. They do not have this option in Gaza, of course, or in the West Bank outside of East Jerusalem. So I think this would be kind of tantamount to saying with South Africa, black South Africans, they lost their citizenship under the Bantu Homeland Citizenship Act of 1970-71. So that's like saying, well, hey, we're not discriminating against them because we're black, we're discriminating against them because they are not South African citizens, and that's why they have to live in Bantustans. Right. So I think it just kind of really misses the real, it's a very shallow sort of analysis of the situation to say it's not about racial matters.
But if I can add one more thing, though.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, when we're talking about, the word apartheid and how it's applied to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's not just the occupied territories we're talking about. There is, a notion of apartheid in Israel proper itself, right? One example would just be the way that land is allocated based on your ethnicity, right? The land, 93% of the land in Israel proper is controlled by the Israeli Lands Authority, an Israeli government body. And in the board of members who decide, who allocates land and who it goes to, 10 of the members are members of the Jewish National Fund. And the Jewish National Fund is an organization that, as their policy, do not sell and do not lease land to non-Jews, meaning that the huge masses of land the Jewish National Fund owns in Israel proper and the territories, they, as a policy, do not give land to non-Jews, which means you have 20% of Palestinians who live in Israel proper aren't even allowed to live in segments of Israel proper itself, even though they're citizens. So that is an instance where you literally actually have segregation, where you have Palestinians who, being 20%, right, of the population, are living on minimal amounts of land. That's where I make the Bantustan analogy from.
Right.
Yeah.
And Josh, I know I'm aware that you are Jewish. You went on a birthright trip. Could you possibly weigh in on some of the things that they were talking about? Did you see evidence of this, or?
Well, I mean, of course, I didn't see evidence of it because on birthright trips they obviously don't bring you to the West Bank. I mean, we did.
First of all, sorry, could you explain what Birthright is for our viewers that don't know?
It's an organization which was founded by some American Jewish philanthropists, which brings every year, it's growing, brings hundreds, if not, I don't know the exact numbers, but it brings tons of American Jews and Jews from elsewhere, like Canada and France to some extent, to Israel for a free 10-day trip to experience the country and get connected with their birthright, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, you know, birthright has a pretty bad connotation amongst Palestinian and Jewish activist groups. I didn't find that per se with my trip. It was my tour guide was very liberal. Mm-hmm. He did present Palestinian issues once in a while. Mm-hmm. But that said, it is true that we didn't go to the West Bank, and there actually was one time when we did drive through the West Bank. But I doubt if anyone on the trip noticed the Palestinian road next to me besides from myself, because I had prior knowledge of the situation before going there. So the extreme things that I've read on the internet and seen on YouTube about the Likud brainwashing machine and how Birthright takes these American Jews and turns them into these crazy, radical pro-Israel activists. I didn't find that to be true on my trip, but I understand that my trip is probably not indicative of the larger program. But I think Birthright does bring up an important issue, mm-hmm. which we want to deal with in JVP. Is that organizations like Birthright, when it was originally founded, Birthright was meant, its mission was Jewish continuity. They wanted Jews to go there and feel Jewish and then go home and find a Jewish wife on that trip and feel connected with Israel. But today, the biggest funder for Birthright is Sheldon Adelson and people like him, and it's been completely co-opted by extremely right-wing members of the American Jewish community. So just like AIPAC and a lot of the other major Jewish communities we have in the United States, what started out as a nice idea has become another tool for people that don't have the same mentality or viewpoint of most liberal American Jews to push their ideas into the community.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about a little bit of, Palestine strategy, that you are involved in the BDS movement, right? And could you explain a little bit about the BDS movement and then your goals for it here at AU, especially this semester?
Sure, yeah. So BDS, it's certainly gotten a lot of press in recent years. It stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. It's not a movement per se. It's a series of tactics that can be used non-violently, non-violent economic methods of fighting against the occupation. No one's killed from boycotting a product or divesting in some industry or anything like that. So it is very much non-violent. It's a bit funny, actually, that it has gotten so much criticism from certain quarters, because for years you hear in the mainstream media, where's the Palestinian Gandhi, that sort of thing. But obviously Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., many of these other activists were very much in support of using boycotts against oppression, to fight that. So right now, in terms of BDS, we're mostly focused on boycott. It's not so much sanctions and divestments, also less so than boycotts, because we have more ability to organize boycotts than to organize sanctions. So at AU right now, this semester, we're working on pushing for a boycott of Hewlett-Packard. Their products are sold in the bookstore and also used in the library, mm-hmm. I believe. Hewlett-Packard is involved in occupation in a number of ways, but just to keep it short, the main way in which they're involved is create, develop, operate a biometric system that's used in various checkpoints in the West Bank. It's used to make it easier for Israeli forces to decide whether Palestinians can travel throughout Palestine, whether they can go from point A to point B, or whether they cannot do so.
JVP, any campaigns that you are planning to? I know you're new, but are you in line with the BDS movement, or what are some of the things you're going to strategize and organize for this semester?
Well, we're attempting to organize as much as Jewish voice as possible, but since the focus is on Jews, to be specific, we believe in those ideas of a divestment and boycotting and sanctions, the BDS movement entirely, the ideology behind it, but we need to formulate a foundation for the organization. That being said, you need to start off by rallying support around you. If it's a Jewish organization, you need Jewish support. We're going to try to go to Hillel. We're going to try to go to functions where, religious functions for Jews on campus, Students for Israel. We're going to reach out to the Jewish community as much as possible to see who would be receptive to our voice. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to talk at first. Once we get to talk, we understand that the ration of, and the logic behind humanity in general, just that you're not supposed to be killing people for no reason. You're not supposed to be occupying and stealing other people's lands. You're not supposed to be kicking people out of their homes. Just that, following that trend of logic and correlating those actions with the actions of Israel, we will try to find as many people who are receptive to our ideas as possible, because this is for the good and welfare. We're trying to show Jewish Americans at American University that it is beneficial for Israel to criticize Israel.
Okay, so we got to wrap up real quick, but I just want to ask both of your groups one question, and that is, if you had a call to action, an opportunity to tell this entire student body something about your organization and, you know, urge them to act, could you just give me 1 or 2 sentences right now?
Yeah, I mean, if we could encourage the students to at least engage in some kind of discourse on the issue of Palestinian prisoners. If any students have seen here that this semester and last semester, members of SJP have done a hunger strike of solidarity with Palestinian prisoners. Many of them are in hunger strike in protest of what's called their administrative detention, meaning that you have a number of Palestinians who were held indefinitely with no charge and no trial and no due process, and are being held indefinitely because of that. So the hunger strike they've been doing is to protest the detentions, which go under all issues of international law, and we want people to engage in a discourse and learn more about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty loaded question, but I guess what I would say is that we really want to erase this myth of us and them as this issue being a foreign issue, because this really, even if you're not Israeli, as an American, and again, especially as an American Jew, we are all culprits in this crime. Our institutions and our politics and our community has endorsed the occupation, and enabled the occupation, siege in Gaza, and everything else that Israel does in the conflict.
All right, thank you very much. We'll be right back.